I've been in business for 32 years and operated very large companies. I should understand if I'm accepted or not. But at that moment, I did not get it. I became a person that needed to constantly be proving myself. And then at what cost?
You know, you might have this dream or this vision to be able to do whatever it is, but you dismiss it and put it away because you think you're not the person who's capable of achieving it.
I started to get to 450. I did not remember a time that I didn't feel pain. And the way I started to lose weight is I looked in the mirror and I'm going to tell you the actual dialogue. I remember it.
I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I think it would be awesome if we can kind of start by just maybe touching base a little bit on what kind of brought you to even write a book in the first place. I know when this episode is live, your book will be out. So I want people to kind of understand a little bit about your story and kind of what that means. So I'd love if we can kind of start with kind of what that inspiration looked like.
Yeah, like many people, we come through crossroads of either dealing with great adversity or losing track of where our vision of our life should be. And, meaning that our dreams start taking a back seat to what's happening in life. So I went through some tough times, and what I started to do was to write. I started journaling, kind of like as a good Generation Xer. Rather than getting therapy, I got duct tape therapy and tried fixing it myself. And I was like, okay, I think this is the way you would do it. So I started journaling, and that didn't really work for me. I have ADHD and dyslexia, and just writing what I was thinking wasn't resonating in any positive way for me. So I started writing a book to myself, and it was like my future self, possible future self, what they would be telling me. And so I started to write that, and I called it The Dreamer's Guide to Achieving in Uncertain Times. And then as I started to progress and sort of discover, what I needed for traction for myself, then it actually became a book. And now I had always wanted to be a coach and an author. It was something that I didn't think was possible based on the academic struggles that I had, but it was a dream. So, but when I kind of found myself, I was like, hey, well, this is a dream to write a book, and it's right there. I've been writing it for like 8 to 10 years, so we could start with this, and that's how this came to be.
Well, I love that. I'm glad you decided to kind of push that forward. It's awesome that I don't want to say it just happened to work out, right? Because 8 to 10 years of consistent effort is a little bit more than just happening to work out. But it's awesome how it started out as this thing that was sort of for yourself that now you're able to kind of, allow other people to peek inside of. I'm curious, as part of that process, was there like a vulnerability aspect that you had to kind of deal with as far as like letting people see inside of maybe some things that you tried to hide or you were ashamed of, early on that you've, grown through?
Yeah, I think that, I've heard it with, as a coach, about 80% of my clients have ADHD as well as I do. And I recognize that, and many experts will say that there's a thing called shame spiraling. And so you'll pick up on something and you just make yourself feel bad about it. So yeah, there was in writing this book, one of the things that I needed to confront were the things that I felt really bad about. The things that I internally I felt shame, but then I started living a life of needing to prove myself. And that created a workaholic mindset. And so what happened is I started to progress and grow and really started to change my life. I thought that I had really stopped all that stuff out. I really did, until I started writing the book. And I started editing the book. And I was like, wow, I just maybe put a Band-Aid on the shame because it's like ripping off, and I had to, then the editor would be like, this doesn't really make sense. Like, can you tell me a little bit? They'd be like all these like things. Can you tell me a little bit deeper? And I was like, no, we're not going deeper anyways. And in fact, this book is, there's something very understated about the book. I'm 56 years old. It's the first time in my life that I've told anybody professionally. There's people in my family that didn't even know that I had dyslexia and ADHD. And so why would I not be open about that? But I felt that I needed to prove myself that I didn't have ADHD or that I could live without those, what I perceived as limitations, which aren't. You had a great guest that talked about ADHD being his superpower.
Yep.
So I mean, it's like if, I think that when I see something like that, it's like, we have strengths and weaknesses, but it becomes a real weakness when you try to stomp out who you are.
Mm.
And that's basically what's happening for many, many years of my life. And that's why I became a person that needed to constantly be proving myself, constantly be outworking people. And then at what cost? Like I love the mission, in how your title came of, no half cakes. I had lots of half cakes, and it was chasing to prove that I was not less. And it's a race that you're never going to win. And then you're going to have a whole life of, half eaten cakes. And
Yeah.
so I was lucky, and I found that I thought when I wrote the book that I had solved those issues, but I found that even though I had written the book, that the actual publishing of the book was to go on your, analogy here, was the icing on the whole cake.
Mm.
And it was a good spiritual journey for me, to be able to express that. And for I am glad that, I hope that someone could read the book and get, out of it. But the whole purpose of the book was to write this book to myself. It being published is the final step of being able to close that chapter and beginning with new things. And, it was an amazing experience to be able to do that and to now share it with people. And I hope, people will enjoy it and be able to get what I got out of it.
Mm. In fact, there's a freedom that comes with that when you kind of own your story and step into it, where it's not this thing you're ashamed of, and you don't need to prove it to anyone else, but you're not even proving it to yourself, really. You're just kind of owning who you are.
Absolutely.
Shortcomings, blessings, whatever you want to look at, pros and cons. But this is you. And there's that freedom that comes from being able to just operate as you. And I think doing what you did and putting it into written word that is now out there for other people to kind of peek at and understand kind of who you are and maybe the things that you used to hide, but now you kind of own fully. I
Yeah.
think, what does that freedom feel like?
Well, it's we use the word freedom, but I think that, one of the things that I found in my, as I started to look at what growth and paradigm shifts were, or to reboot and recalibrate, rebalance, it is the word, what you're saying, it is freedom. But what I register it is, it's kind of like this sense of being home, this sense of center, this sense of, having clarity of who I am. And most importantly, because as the title is, The Dreamer's Guide, I'm all about dreaming, and actualizing those dreams, that now I'm in a place where I have the freedom to do my work. What I feel, everybody has a feeling of why they're on this earth. And now I feel I can work on that. And that is a very freeing thing. But the feeling to say I feel free, yes, that's a good definition, but it's just so much more nuanced that I don't even know if I have the words to it. It's just so
Mm.
deep and meaningful to be able to say, hey, I have freedom to just be who I am, and I have freedom to begin a process of thinking and innovation and feeling, and that this is just the beginning of personal growth. You know, I mean, it's just like people look for, big things like big signs. They look for big miracles. I find that the most deepest and impactful things are just the small things that people don't even notice sometimes. It's
Yeah,
like the little nuances is what makes a big deal.
I agree 100%. In your book, you talk a bit about putting your dream on a shelf. Can we
Yeah.
talk about what that feels like in that moment?
That's like uh I would characterize, like the times where, I had dreams and aspirations. Um, but they were so rooted and meaningful to me that I couldn't just like, you know, call it and say, this is flatline, this dream is gone. I gotta just grieve and move on. This was too big, too central to who I was. So basically, the alternative would be to say, hey, I'm going to just safely. And the analogy in the book was that somebody, like, you could imagine somebody getting a very, this delicate um, piece of china, and you're going to wrap it up. Just make sure that you could store it safely, and then put it in a shelf where it could get no damage, but it could be there. Sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to put things in pause. But if you start living your life that every dream needs to be put aside, it gets to be real heavy. And that's when we start talking about not being who you are. That's when you start diverting away from that.
Mhm.
So the good thing is that for some reason I kept hold of my dreams, and I put them in away in some kind of karmic storage bin in the heart. And when I was able to find the strength to go back and pull those out and restart it, then it was an amazing thing, especially when you're able to actually bring them to life. And then you know why you kept them. Like a lot of people, I talk about it in the book that very recently, it wasn't really too long ago that in like between 2021 and now, but right in 23, when I really started to chop into my weight loss journey and dealing with my obesity. And a lot of people will say, "Well, that was the thing on the shelf." And it really wasn't. I mean, like, the weight loss is nice. It's a nice number to talk about. 200 pounds is a respectable amount of weight, but that's not even what I accomplished. I mean, it was the other stuff that I accomplished. Like, having dyslexia and ADHD when I could not finish school. It was, uh, when you talk about the no half cake story, I could feel what you're talking about because I'd been there with my own kids. I could, I could actually feel the emotion when you were talking about it. When I could not, when I had to break away from college, um, the pain that I felt throughout the last 38 years has never gone away. I always felt very, very bad about it because, again, I wanted to prove something. I was dyslexic. I have ADHD. Um, as a kid, I really didn't learn to read until the seventh grade. So it was very real to me that I wanted to accomplish this. So when I was able to lose the weight, I realized that there's just nothing that I can't do if I really want to do it. And so I picked up the phone and I called RIT and I said, "Hey, I want to come back." And the lady who's helping me, my person at RIT, says to me, she goes, "We're getting ready for me to go back." And she goes, "Well, do you have any questions or concerns?" And I go, well, yeah, I have a big question and a concern." She goes, "Well, what is it?" And I was like, "Well, how do I know when you accept me to come back?" And she goes, "Accept you?" She goes, "You're you're already in. Just come back, sign up for your classes, and finish." And that was a big thing for me because I, to that moment, didn't even feel that I belonged. But because I've had a distinguished career, they were just like, "Wow, it would be great to have you to come back and look at all the things that you've done." Even at that moment, I didn't even register that I had any success in my life and that I didn't even deserve to be there. And so that was a big moment for me. And the weight loss journey opened those doors of saying that, yeah, there's a lot of dreams on the shelf and I'm going to start pulling them out. I am going to, I also have a food analogy. I'm flipping hotcakes, like making pancakes, let's get those dreams out and flip them. Let's get them on and let's cook them up and get them going, get them on the plate.
Do you think there's maybe some separation between who you actually are and who you think you are in that moment, like who you believe you are? Because I'm wondering if, when you're looking at these dreams or wondering, hey, am I accepted into this program? One of the things I'm hearing is sort of a disconnect between who you actually are and who you tell yourself you are. And I think for a lot of people, you might have this dream or this vision to be able to do whatever it is, but you dismiss it and put it away because you think you're not the person who's capable of achieving it, right? And it's this kind of vision of yourself that you have as less than. So is it about kind of integrating those two to kind of understand, hey, let's remove all this doubt and negativity about what I am telling myself I am and really step into who I actually am?
Right. Well, I think that that's a great point. And where I think that we're looking at is a couple of different components. Is one, what is the environment telling me that I'm in? If I'm in a bad spot, I might be getting negativity, and there's people that are giving me information, and I'm starting to believe it. I'm living in a world that maybe things are just not working out right, and that validates their story or what the environment is telling me, and it confuses me based on what I feel and what I actually see that's happening. But what I think that when people start to achieve in their life, and many of your guests who have defied the odds, is when they start realizing that they have authorship. I have authorship to be able to take the course of where I want to go, where I want to take it, despite what's happening environmentally. So yes, there are times that I've been confused and believe the narrative that either circumstance or other people wrote for me, or that I adapted opinions and lowered my ceiling and started to exist with that information, which is not entirely true. And
Mm.
so, yeah, even when I went to RIT and I said, yeah, I want to come back, and that I didn't, I mean, I've been in business for 32 years and operated very large companies. I should understand if I'm accepted or not. But at that moment, I did not get it. I did not get that I was in. And I'm still having this vision that I don't belong here. And that, maybe they're going to figure out that I academically don't have the chops to be here. But apparently I do. This is a weird thing. I didn't know this. So I'm back in school, right? I'm just doing my classes, and I have a full-time job. I'm a coach, but I'm doing these classes, right? So I get an email, and they this, and I was like, I couldn't understand what I was reading. It was like kind of like laughably absurd. So it says, hey, you're in the National Honor Society. And I'm like, what's that? Like, what is this email? Because I still identify in 1988 where I was a D student, just barely passing. So to like get A's, I'm like, I don't even know what that means, man. And so even though like I'm a coach and I'm writing a book about it, we have to understand that you're not immune to it. You always have to be working to understand that you belong, and that it's like a garden. You can't let it go. Like when you talk about the relationship with your children and how this podcast even started, it's something that needs to be developed and continued to be nurtured over time. And that's the same way it is internally with us. So I find a lot of humor in it. When I find it and I see it, I laugh and I smile and I'm like, look, I found it. Look, another one. Let's clean it up and let's move forward. So I don't look at it as a heavy thing. I find great humor and joy, and seeing like when I get a little surprise and someone says, "Hey, you're an A student in this school and you're getting recognized for it." I'm like, "Who you talking about me?" So, but I have a lot of fun with it, and I also see that that's the sign that there's still room for a lot of continual growth. So now it's really exciting where before it was a real heavy thing, but now it's
Right.
a real lighter thing. And a lot of it comes, Jim, with being happy with that I'm not perfect, and that's the freedom. I don't have
Yeah.
to be perfect.
I'm glad you said that because, the way that you're describing it aligns very well with most people who are in this spot is kind of once you get over the hump, you start to look forward to things that might feel a little like a soft spot. You're like looking for another area because it feels now like an opportunity and you're excited to find an area to work on. But people who are not in that spot, right? Someone who is just starting this journey, to them, that concept feels foreign, right? It feels like you and I are speaking a totally different language. How the heck is it possible for you to want to hear things that you suck at? I'm over here barely able to like get through the day. Like for that person, right? Someone who has a lot of dreams, but doesn't yet see truly who they are, right? They're still in kind of the fog of believing everything else that everyone tells them. Where does that person start? Like, what do you think the first step is in that situation?
Yeah, this might be going down like a tangent, but just to give you context, when in 2021 I was gaining weight and I was at 450, and I was pretty much okay in life up to 380. And after 380, I started to really feel the limitations. And every 5 pounds, I lost mobility somehow and was feeling a great deal of pain. So as I started to get to 450, I did not remember a time that I didn't feel pain. Like that basically, I was like, I lost track emotionally and mentally and through memory of when was the actual date of the last time that I felt good. And, based on what my doctors have always been, I'm like so lucky to have doctors that actually care about me. Like I don't know why they just like really are amazing. So like I could almost see them feeling bad. Like, this is the fork of when you're going to start getting real illnesses. And like I could see that I should start getting ready from estate planning and sort of like fixing my business because, this is a bad situation. So what I needed to discover was what was the date of the last time that I felt well and that I had full mobility. And I couldn't find the date. So what I did is I love photography. So I have thousands and thousands of picture on my camera roll. So it took me like about an hour. Just think about it. It took me an hour of flipping picture by picture. And I started, it's chronological in date. And then I found a family picture of me and my wife and two sons, and we were hiking. And one that I could hike. I could go through a canyon, and we were actually hiking for hours. And it was such a good day. And I remembered the day. And I remembered that was the day that that I felt physically good and that I had full mobility and I could do that stuff. And then I saw how far back it was. And then I was like, what I'm going to focus on is wellness. And if I'm going to, like people say, I'm going to fight for my life. If I am going to fight for anything, I'm going to fight every day to go back to that vision and feeling of wellness. And that's where I'm going to start from. And then it actually started to happen. Then I used the David Goggins Navy SEAL vernacular of evolutions. So I broke it down. I knew that you can't lose all this weight with one strategy, that I needed to get out of the danger zone. So I needed to get back to the 380 because that's when I felt well. And so I did get back to 380. Then I got to 340, and then I even felt even better. And then I broke the 300 mark, which I hadn't for almost 20 years. That was an amazing experience. So now I'm not finished with the weight loss, but I'm at a weight where I feel and could do everything I want to do. There's nothing that I can't do that I want. If I want to do it, I have the physical abilities to do that. It's the first time in 20 years. It's the first time in 20 years that I've gone to the doctor and all my labs, every single lab that they could do is normal. And I haven't had that since I was 35. I'm 56. So going back to what your question is, like, how do you start? You have to start with, I think, the core of what the most important value is. And that is the feeling of wellness and the feeling of peace and self-love. So the reason why it took me 20 years to lose the weight is because I despise the way I look. I said, I need to lose weight because I hate the way I look. I don't want to be this way. And the way I started to lose weight is I looked in the mirror and I'm going to tell you the actual dialogue. I remember it. So I'm looking in the mirror and I go, hey, if you want to be a big guy, you're going to be the best big guy. And I love you the way you are. You're okay. That was it. And then I was just like, I love me the way I'm not going to change, or villainize me. In fact, when I look at that version of myself, 450-pound Alex, that was the best version of myself. I don't think I could ever be that strong. To be 400 pounds and show up every day and go to the family events. And even though I was in pain, I was showing up and I did the work and I went to the gym and I lost the weight. I changed my diet. That person showed up to make the life that I have today. So if anything, if I were to look back to the best version of myself, it's certainly not now. The best version of myself was the big guy that did the work for me and made this happen. So when I was able to say, hey, you're the best version of yourself is who you are today, because only you today, Jim today, Alex today, can deliver whatever dreams and aspirations we have for tomorrow.
Right.
And so to villainize that person and to beat their butt down that you're saying that it's a horrible thing because I have this better vision of myself, that's not going to come unless you start to take care of who you are and accept who you are right now. That was me with ADHD and dyslexia and 450 pounds and saying, hey, I'm good. I'm good the way I am, and then also that was the beginning of it. Now
Right.
I do want to say that, and I say this a lot when I speak and when I write, the Lord made us in all different shapes and sizes. There are people who are going to be hearing me who have all kinds of different body types. And what I found is that, that my waist size has no relevance in the value that I have in the world. You could be who you want to be. Um, that's what I discovered, that the weight had no difference to it, but I was making it an issue.
Yeah.
And that's where I changed a little bit.
So I love the story. I want to put a little bit of nuance on it. And I think that this is an important conversation to have. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. But I think that there's a very big difference in what you're saying versus body positivity. Because, for a lot of people, it's, hey, I love the way I look. I am, speaking positively about, hey, let me just be 450 pounds because big is beautiful, or whatever the terms are going to be.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that there's a very big, no pun intended, difference here between loving yourself where you are and wanting to be a healthier, better version of yourself versus
Absolutely.
telling yourself, this is amazing, I should stay this way. Right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. There's a balance to it. And like, for instance, where I sit now, technically, it's debatable. I talk to my nutritionist and workout coach and doctors, like, what is the weight, with BMI, and then people say BMI really shouldn't be a metrics anyways. But if anything, I could lose probably another 70 pounds, which is a lot of weight. Um, I don't care about the weight. I care about self-improvement and being able to do things. There's got to be utility. What I found at 450 pounds, it separated me from the life that I wanted to live. Now, metaphorically, the 450 pounds created a world where everything was a half cake. because I was so separated from the people that I loved. I was so separated from doing the things that I loved. And so now I just created a universe where every day was a half cake, every day was. So I totally agree with you. What I was looking at is utility. I'm looking at health, and there's metrics that you can follow to see where you are, to be able to have preventative care, and to be able to explore and live the life the way you want to live it. So and what happens is that we need to accept who we are, and this might be controversial, but at the same time, a lot of times I felt that I was stuck there because I didn't have the tools to be able to do it. So I
Mm.
had to, then we're stuck in acceptance. Now, are you stuck in acceptance because that's what you want? Or are you stuck in acceptance because you have no resources or tools or support to be able to get to where you want to be? And that's the question that we were talking about, as far as negative thoughts that are keeping you in place when you should be moving forward. Because you know, when I would, there was a day, and this is why your half cake story resonated with me. I mean, man, when I heard that reel, when I first time I heard that, I had to just like stop, like time stopped for a second, because I used to be that way, but then I romanticized it. I created a narrative that was so false that shocked me. When I became awake of it, I was like shocked. Like, how could you make yourself believe this? And it was just so false. So what I did is I romanticized, and I made my biggest virtue to you or to any other human being, my family, was that how much shit I can take, that I can put up with stuff, that because I have to do it, I can work 7 days a week. I can work 15 hours a day. I can do that. And the reason why I'm good to be your friend is that I can take it day after day after day. And what I realized, that is a lie. That what I should be intolerant of is pain. What I should be intolerant of is dysfunction. And if something's not working, my greatest virtue now to you is that you know now that if something doesn't work, that there's nothing that I won't do for you to fix it. That if there's pain, I'm going to fix that pain. If something's broken, I'm going to work to fix it. I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm not going to make workarounds and band-aids. I want solutions that are sustainable. And that is where I took in the whole cake.
Yeah.
Like,
I think a lot of what I'm hearing here is around not necessarily tolerating where you're at and saying it just is what it is, not hating yourself for it, but this acceptance of, all right, cool. This is what I have. Super realistic. Here is where I'm at. Like understanding very plainly, this is exactly what the scenario is. All right, cool. Now what? And I think it's that not lying to yourself, not trying to paint a brighter picture and say, this is what I want, right? I want to feel this pain every day. I want to, be whatever it is. And it could be a weight issue, could be a gambling issue, could be a who knows issue, could be a workaholic, like whatever it is. If that thing in your life is taking you away from the life that you want to lead, you can accept the fact that, hey, where you are today is where you are, right? We can't necessarily change that and we can't wish it away. But I think the more upfront and honest you are with yourself about accepting the starting point and then taking kind of that next step in the right direction and understanding, like much to your point, and although I'm sure it was painful to have to go back and look, to spend an hour to look at how far away it was that the last time you felt good. And also, if you look at the other flip side of that, it took you that long to go from feeling good to this current version.
yes,
Right. So it didn't happen overnight,
no,
from quote unquote positive to negative. So that therefore must mean it ain't going to happen in reverse the same way.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But I think that there's this little multiplier effect when you handle the mental aspect first.
Mm-hmm.
When you understand truly who you are and your personality and your authenticity and your identity, and you kind of step forward in that, where then it becomes this multiplier effect where, yeah, maybe you may not necessarily be down to the same weight yet. But, once I think you get some of that mental aspect handled, you start to see it in a different way, right? There's a different perspective, and that kind of speeds up the process because you understand the rules differently.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately kind of what we're talking about in this conversation is we can't necessarily change the cards we're dealt. Okay. And even if some of the time we gave ourselves those cards, we made bad decisions, we did what we did, whatever the case may be, we are here on the playing board. We got to accept that because if we start, just lying to ourselves, it's not going to end well.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to waste time. We're going to make ourselves angry. We're going to, cause issues, and it's going to delay the inevitable.
Yeah.
But I think like much of what we're talking about here is accepting the fact that you are where you are, then what? Right? So
Yeah.
it's that now what conversation. What are you going to do now? What's that
Yeah.
next step you can take?
Yeah. There's an opinion or a feeling or a sense that came up, as I started to go through this path. And I really can't quite, maybe one of your listeners can tell me what I'm feeling, but I'll tell you what it is. It is the word that I don't care. Now, I care a lot about people, and I feel that I do have a lot of passion and concern and empathy for the people around me, but there's this sense of that I don't care. And what I'm trying to tell people is that I don't care about adversity. Like, I have dreams, and I know things are hard, and I know that things are not going to work out. I'm just focused on finding solutions that are going to work out. And if they take a long time, then that's okay. But I'm into the work, and I'm going to do what I need to do every day to have a sense of wellness and joy and work toward my dreams. And I'm okay with the adversity. I know that it's there. In fact, this is a funny thing, because there there was the assumption by the people closest to me that when I started to really show signs of really making big paradigm shifts in my life, and of course the biggest sign was when they saw me lose a bunch of weight, and then there was other things that I started to do that they could see, so they assumed that my life got better. Like, I didn't know what that meant. Like, I didn't know what they were thinking. Like, what do you think my life got better? And do you realize that the same problems that I had at 450 pounds, I have now? They're the same problems. And it's just that I understand that those problems are there, and I understand that they don't impact who I am as a human being. I'm going to work through them, and I don't care that they're there. I'm just going to work towards solutions. And so this feeling of, and I think that now that I think about it, when you were talking about freedom, that is the freedom, that I'm not as impacted by adversity. Now, don't get me wrong, Jim. Like, I'll wake up and I'll have bad days, and there'll be days that I'll be miffed. It's just it doesn't last very long. Like, my like I might be like, oh man, that's like that sucks, but it will go away pretty fast, and I'll go back to being, very constructive and back on the race. So I enjoy those feelings, because I think that that feeling of sometimes of the, so a lot of people with um, ADHD or any kind of anxiety will talk about, when things get to the fight or flight, that just like regular things could get to your nervous system. So I look at it just like as a little cardio, when I get in the treadmill and you get your heartbeat up, it's okay for the nerves to get up. You just have to make sure to manage it in a way that you can use it in a constructive way to move on. I think that those signs are good, because they're telling you something. And whenever I feel any kind of adversity now, I will stop and I'll say, what is the lesson here? And especially if it lingers. Like, if I'm in a season where, like, I'm not sure how to solve certain situations, I'll say, stop, time out. My subconscious, the universe, my soul is trying to tell me something. So let me listen to the lesson so that we can move on. And so I'm very thoughtful of that. And I think that adversity is a good teacher. I always say to people, don't be afraid of being, like, don't try to be perfect, and mistakes are awesome. I think that you've heard business people say something like this, where, don't let a good mistake go to waste. I mean, like, you should learn from it and refine it and move on from there. So there's like a real good sense of, I think, balance and optimism, and in expecting that there's going to be good and bad days. But I have the same problems that I did when I was 450 pounds. My life is still the same, and but my joy is different. The level of joy is much different. And I also found out that my joy is not necessarily connected to the circumstances that I live in. There's a lot of things that I can't control, but that doesn't mean that I can't go home and have, joy and experience love with my family just because things are hard. It just makes us stronger to deal with it. If you embrace the joy, you do become stronger in dealing with adversity.
Mhm. That is true. Can I give you a perspective flip on the I don't care part?
Yeah, I would love it.
Because I feel like, when I'm hearing you say that, I think that there's a lot of things that people do care about, but we kind of tell ourselves we don't care. And to me, the language change there that works really well is it's not a priority to me, right? So rather than saying I don't care, you say this isn't a priority.
Yeah.
So it's kind of defining what is a priority to you. And maybe in that former version of your life, your health may not have been a priority. You care, right? You want to be alive for your family, for whatever else. You care about feeling better, but it wasn't a priority. You made work or whatever else a priority for you. So other things kind of slip back down. And I think for people to understand that language, to be intentional with, hey, this is a priority or this is not a priority. And just to break it down super clean, hey, what are you focusing on right now? What are you making a priority in your life? Because that's the stuff that's going to grow. And if you're making the wrong things a priority, it shouldn't be a surprise why this happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love that little perspective shift, I think, is going to help a lot of people kind of unlock that little step.
Yeah. In something that I discovered along the way, and thank you for putting that perspective, because I've been searching to understand what I was feeling and putting the words to it. Somehow, I think when people are looking to grow, they feel that things are absolute. So what is I can make there's only a certain amount of priorities that I can manage at any one time. And that's something that I discovered for myself. And that doesn't mean that just because it's not a priority today, that I can't allow it to be a priority tomorrow or in a year from now. And I think that's where we really start hitting traction of growth, to say that these are my priorities now. And once I get to a certain level, that these priorities are going to change and I'm going to have shifting priorities. There's going to be some things that are like signature priorities, like my health and fitness, my family. Those are things that always stay. But I have the agency to be able to mix it up during certain times in development. But I think oftentimes we feel that that you can never change, or that you can't shift as the seasons change. And I think that is where a lot of power and creativity comes. That, I will say to you that if, we meet again 2 years from now, I would hope to say to you that, hey, I evolved. And now my priorities and things that are important to me and the initiatives and agendas and projects I'm working on have grown with me. But there was a time where I felt pretty much an all or nothing attitude, and that things were absolute, that they could not change. And I was stuck. It's like I was born in a certain way, I was raised a certain way, and that calculates to living a life a certain way. And I realized that I don't have to do that. I could change as I wish.
Yeah, you should. And you're supposed to often. And I feel like that's the part a lot of people miss. And I think if you look at it too from the way that I envision it is you're going to have a lot of priorities, whether it's, your health, your finances, your spiritual health, your emotions, your relationship, like all of these different things. And you can't make all of them the number one priority at the same time, because then there wouldn't be a number one, right? So you're spinning a bunch of different plates. And what I see happen as people walk down this journey is as they get a little bit more comfortable in their true identity and they strip out the definitions that other people gave them and they really start to be who they were authentically designed to be, you start spinning less plates and you start spinning one bigger one, because it's now not just all of these separate things. It's you. You're starting to just manage you, and your priorities kind of come into line with your core values and who you are and how you operate, how you move through the world. And I think that's the part that you need to highlight. And when you look at this journey, it's going to be this thing that's going to be a little chaotic to start with, which is why you need someone by your side to kind of help you walk through this.
That's
That's,
right. Yeah.
it's a very beneficial part. So don't try and like man
Yeah.
up and do it by yourself. Like it's
Yeah.
very much helpful if you ask for help in this initial part. I did it. I would assume you did it. Like most of the people who've gotten somewhere had some help. So do not try and do this yourself.
Yeah.
That said, as you continue to kind of go on this journey, I think it's really important to understand, yeah, your priorities are going to shift, but ultimately it becomes about who you are and how you move through the world. And
Yeah.
it does get a little easier, right? And
Yeah.
again, to what you said before, yeah, you're still going to have rough days. You're still going to have issues, right? Where that plate is going to wobble a little bit, but the feedback loop becomes shorter, where
Hmm.
you understand who you are and how you operate, what your priorities are, and kind of how to move through it becomes way easier to stabilize things rather than having it throw you totally off course because you know who the heck you are. Right? It's much easier to get back to that rather than the world's definition of all that stuff. So, man, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you for that. Before we wrap up, anything that we should cover that we haven't touched base on yet?
Well, I mean, this has been a great conversation, and you even answered life questions that I had for me. So, I mean, like, this has been fantastic. And the one thing that I would say is you are correct. Like, I have like my mini board of directors, and I have people who help me, professional people, people who knew and could guide me from the health and the physical, mental, and spiritual. And you need to have a solid rock of people that you could go to. And what I did is that I did shrink my sphere of influence when it came to this changes that I needed to make in life. I needed to have a place to go to, and I needed to make sure that they also wouldn't agree with me with everything. That they were going to challenge me, and that didn't always feel good. But they were there, and I could trust them, and that was great. And I would say those people who know who they are, I would not have made it without them, without their expertise, their care, their the feeling of making the these were professionals, but I just really felt the love, and that changed everything for me. The only thing that I would say in closing is that I think that everybody has a dream, and those dreams are there for a reason, and it's going to be messy. You don't have to be perfect, but just start. Whatever starting may look like, if and even just Jim, just thinking about it every day shifts your mind to where you need to go. So, man, I love your show, and the guests that you've had on here are amazing, and it's great to be part of this conversation. And I think it's all part of people who are really important in this world, who shouldn't compromise the things that are most important to them, and that's their heart. So that's all I would say. Is just keep going for what's important to you.
Well, I love it. And again, honor to you for doing the work that you've done and continue to do. And where can people find you and your book?
Well, it's will be on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and then you could also check me out at my website as well. Um, yeah.
All right. We'll make sure to include a link in the show notes as well. So again, tremendous honor. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.